Welcome to the BEASTwriter podcast. I am your host, Ryan Sakamoto, and today we are going to be breaking down and reveal my top 50 big board. That is right, ladies and gentlemen. It is time, which means it's draft season, and everyone's excited because this is the best part of the offseason, is talking about the NFL draft. And so here we go. Now, before we go ahead and get started, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you who subscribe to my channel. I'm picking up subscribers daily now, and I just want to make sure that you guys get my live content or uploaded content in real time. So be sure to turn on the bell notifications so you get notified when I do go live or when I upload content. Obviously, I'm also noticing and checking my analytics that 83% of you guys are still not subscribed to my channel yet watch all my videos. So I strongly encourage you to go ahead and hit the subscribe button in the lower right hand corner of your screen and stay up to date on all things Beast. Alright, so let's go ahead and get started. I am excited. I know you're excited. People on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram have been hitting me up as to what my thoughts are around the NFL draft time, because that's my bread and butter. As much as I like to say my spot-on predictions and analysis, obviously the receipts don't lie. Those are all good and dandy, but the NFL draft is really how I got started in breaking into the NFL media and giving me the confidence to go ahead and do that. So for those who followed me since day one, you guys know how I like to do it. For those who don't, I reveal my top 50 big board similar to Mel Kiper and Todd McShay. And again, my big board is, I would say, different from Todd McShay and Mel Kiper every year, but for the majority of the big board and for the big board stake, most picks are probably in line. It's just where we're ranking those players. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Starting with picks 1 through 5 as I break down my top 50 big board. And again, the big board is very different from an NFL mock draft. A mock draft is actually how I see the NFL draft playing out, not who I would pick if I was the team's GM, whereas the big board is just a vertical board, the best of the best, BPA, which stands for best player available in my opinion. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started, and without further ado, let's start at number 1. Coming at number 1, that is none other than quarterback out of Clemson, Trevor Lawrence, and I think everyone would agree that he's a generational talent. What he brings to the table, aside from his on-field production, is his intangibles. You talk about that it factor. You talk about that dual threat ability. You talk about making all the right throws, all the right reads, going through his progressions, being a team leader, team captain, and so forth. He checks all the boxes. And when you take that all into account and then you break it down further, well, what can't he do? I think that's what we have to look at here, is what can't he do? What can't he do? Because he seems to be doing everything, right? Whether it's throwing off platform, making all the throws like I just mentioned, manipulating the sharks, circling the arc, and manipulating the pocket, buying some time, and then escapability, right? Allowing his receivers extra time to get open. See, these are things that usually you have to coach up, keeping your eyes downfield, looking off the safety when you know the ball's going the other direction. So those minute details and attention to details is what separates Trevor Lawrence from, let's say, some of these other quarterbacks coming out of the draft. But again, Trevor Lawrence to me is a generational talent, and I guess it's across the board, from Todd McShay to ESPN Mel Kiper, myself, Daniel Jeremiah. We all view that Trevor Lawrence is the best can't-miss prospect in this upcoming draft, and he slots in at number 1. And people always love how I like to make my comparisons, because it's pretty spot on to how the comparisons play out. I mean, you check the YouTube Twitter receipts, they speak for themselves. So when it comes to Trevor Lawrence's game, my comparison as far as his ceiling is concerned comes back to Pat Mahomes. I mean, you just go back to the tape and you just see very similarities in their game. And when you put 2 and 2 together, what do you get? I think that Trevor Lawrence has Pat Mahomes' ceiling. All right. So without further ado, let's move on to number 2. No surprise at number 1, right? But number 2 is where it gets really interesting. And I have DeVonta Smith out of Alabama. Now people are, oh my gosh, this guy's a huge Alabama fan. He's biased. Well, the game film don't lie, bro. The game film does not lie. And the knock on DeVonta Smith is that he's built more like a wide receiver Deshaun Jackson than he is, let's say, a Terrell Owens. But, again, look at the film. Every scout, every GM, every VPOP, Vice President of Player Personnel, will tell you the number one indicator you look at when projecting a player at the NFL level is what? Game film. You can test well, you can be a workout warrior, but at the end of the day, you can have on your hands a Mike Mamula. There's all these workout warrior numbers that people talk about all the time, but does it translate onto the football field? And again, that's something that I always point out when it comes to the NFL Combine. For me, I don't put too much stock in the NFL Combine. What the NFL Combine does is it basically confirms what you see on film. So you do the research on film, and then you see if a guy really runs 4.4, 4.5 based on the measurables. Or does he leap? What's his leaping ability? What's his lateral agility based on the 3-cone drill? What's his get off based on the 20-cone short shuttle? These are things that you look at, and that's why you guys follow me, is because I can point these things out. Not a lot of people will talk and go in depth about why these measurables are so important. Because, again, if you see a guy that runs, let's say, 4.43 on film, but then at the combine he runs a 4.67, that's going to be a cause for concern. And then you have to do your research, backtrack, and then figure out what the discrepancy is there. But getting back to DeVonta Smith, the durability on him is red flags, right? That's the red flag on him, is durability. His height, his weight, his speed's not ideal. He's not built like an Andre Johnson, Terrell Owens, that type of guy. But what you are getting is, again, the film doesn't lie. You're getting the best college football player today, without question. We all saw what he did, and you cannot argue that DeVonta Smith was the best of the best at not only his possession, but in the entire college football. And this is what he does This is what he does well. He runs a full route tree, doesn't take false steps, finds soft spots in zone coverage, right? He high points 50-50 balls outside the numbers or even inside the numbers, and he's elusive in open space and has returnability. So when you take all that into account, you're really getting a playmaker at the top of the draft. And when you look at the red flags and you're sitting in that war room and you're being like, okay, well, man, DeVonta Smith is awesome, man, but gosh, I don't like the way he looks. He looks a little skinny. But you know what? Those who know, or those who are in the know, understand how physiques work. Me being a bodybuilder, I know exactly that DeVonta Smith can bulk up and where to bulk up without losing any speed. You don't want to compromise your speed when you bulk up. That's the most important thing for a wide receiver. And you don't want to lose that lateral agility, but you still want to build up that upper strength so you can stiff arm a guy, shake tacklers, and make plays down the field after initial contact. Obviously, yards after the catch, right? So, with that being said, I love DeVonta Smith slotted at number 2. And looking at Mel Kiper, because you guys don't have ESPN Insider, he has Penei Sewell from Oregon mocked at number 2. Not mocked at number 2, on his big board, ranked number 2 is Penei Sewell for Mel Kiper. For me, it's DeVonta Smith. All right. Now, if you want a comparison as for who I would compare DeVonta Smith to, I was going back and forth, and I say Marvin Harrison. And I know that gave you guys goosebumps because, like, man, Marvin Harrison's a Hall of Fame player, bro. Like, he was one of the best to ever do it and ever lace him up. Yes, I see a similar career, and that's the ceiling that DeVonta Smith can and should have if he stays healthy and plays in the right system. So without further ado, let's move on to number 3. Exciting, right? Coming in at number 3, I have a player who didn't even play this last year. He opted out, and he comes and hails from the SEC, and his name is Ja'Marr Chase. Now, Ja'Marr Chase, for those who don't know, had a stellar campaign in 2019 under Joe Burrow, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. They also had Thaddeus Moss back there, Justin Jefferson, of course. But Ja'Marr Chase was a sophomore, and during his sophomore season, he really shined. I mean, the guy really shined. He had a year similar to what DeVonta Smith had this year. A Biletnikoff Award winner and so forth, right? Got all these accolades. He is so good. He was so good until 2019. Let me just run off some stats for you. I believe he had 84 catches for 1,780 yards. So 84 catches for 1,780 yards. If you're doing the math, that's 21.2 yards per pop. And he set the SEC record for touchdowns with 20. So you do the math, you put that all together in this algorithmic formula, and what do you get? You get the number 3 player ranked on my big board in Ja'Marr Chase, despite not playing in 2019. Now that's saying something. That's saying a lot, because when you look at the numbers and you look at what Ja'Marr Chase brings to the table, again, he's very similar to what DeVonta Smith brings to the table. However, he's a little bit bigger. I see a wiry guy when it comes to DeVonta Smith. Coming out of college, I see more of a physique standpoint to where you can kind of bulk up Ja'Marr Chase in all the right places at the NFL level, and the strength and conditioning coach will have to do that and know what areas to focus on. But if you're asking me, I think it comes down to maybe his lower trunk a little bit, maybe work up on those quads, those fast twitch muscle fibers. You can do a lot of plyometrics there, and then also upper body strength, right? Because you're going to be going across the middle and you're not seeing these 6'3", 215, 225 pound linebackers. You're seeing these linebackers are 6'3", 6'4", 250 sometimes, and 245, right? 235 to 250 range. So that's a huge discrepancy from the college game to the NFL level. And when you're going up against and crossing into these zones, you're going to have to take a beating. Now, how you sustain that beating, that remains to be seen. That's where the strength and conditioning coach comes into play, because it's his job to bulk these players up to whatever weight. And I don't like putting a number on weight. Anybody who does that, you're doing yourself a disservice. You can't look at a guy and say, oh, he's 5'5", so he should be weighing 155 pounds. No. I hate body analysis, because a lot of these guys don't really know what they're talking about. Even GM, Trent Baalke, did all the time. He hit body analysis with Joe Looney. He hit body analysis with Tank Carradine. He hit body analysis with Aaron Lynch. You can't do that. You can't just put out 15 to 20 pound number. Like, oh, you have to put 15 to 20 pounds. Okay, exactly what I stated in my earlier podcast. Where is this weight coming from? And all weight is not created equal. How much is that fat percentage and how much is that muscle percentage? Because you need a combination of both. And on top of that, is it the upper trunk or the lower trunk? Upper half or lower half? Is it the midsection? Do you have to maybe tone up here to have a stabilization of the core muscles? All this plays a role. So getting back to Ja'Marr Chase, what does he do well, right? Ja'Marr Chase, like I just mentioned, he has a bigger physique than DeVonta Smith. However, the skill set remains the same, right? He is a vertical downfield threat. Every time he touches the ball, he can high point 50-50 balls and win those high point 50-50 balls at the catch point. Has a big catch radius. The guy can go across the middle and take a beating, right? And he's a mismatch nightmare down in the red zone. Aside from that, he can run the full route tree and he has strong hands. So when you put that all together, again, you're getting a complete wide receiver who is very young. Again, I just mentioned he was a sophomore in 2019. He took 2020 off, so now there's less tread on his tires, which I'll get into a little bit later on another player who pops in the top 5. But with that being said, you're getting Ja'Marr Chase, who is young, has yet to hit his ceiling at the college level. What do you think his projection is going to be at the NFL level? Sky's the limit for the guy. So if you want a comp comparison for Ja'Marr Chase, I'm going to say Reggie Wayne. Marvin Harrison's teammate, Reggie Wayne. And I see a lot of Reggie Wayne in Ja'Marr Chase's game. All right, so let's move on to number 4. This is where it gets really fun, guys. Really fun. If you follow me on Twitter, you know this is my draft crush. The guy from Alabama, huge fan. And that is none other than Bay Area, Antioch, born and raised kid, Najee Harris. Now, Najee Harris slots in at number 22 at Mel Kiper. So you're wondering why the discrepancy from 4 on my list to 22 on Mel Kiper's list. Well, even Mel Kiper gets it wrong once in a while, right? But for me, I am not going to go away from what I've been seeing on film year after year after year. I've been watching Najee Harris dating back to his days in high school at Antioch. So when you put that all together, I see the same type of guy. Talk to coaches, they say the same exact thing year in and year out. Saw his progress. Obviously, you have to do the research on that. Luckily, I'm from the Bay Area, so the scouting report on him is very promising. Not just Alabama, not just high school, goes way back even before that. But what you're getting is a complete running back. And let's look at what Najee Harris brings to the table, right? So let's look at what he did at Alabama. Well, all he did was break the SEC record for touchdowns in the season with 30 touchdowns in one season. That's passing running back Derrick Henry, who also wore number 22, who was also from Alabama, and just happens to be my comp. So everyone's asking me what a comp for my comp. Derrick Henry. Now, that's his ceiling. Is he going to be as good as Derrick Henry? I'm not saying that, but that's his ceiling. And that's a player who brings a similar skill set to, if you were to ask me what Najee Harris brings to the table, right? If you read my scouting report on Twitter, dating back to 2019, this is how far back I go, right? So dating back to 2019, check my Twitter, YouTube receipts. I say he could turn a 3-yard loss into a 3-yard gain. Let me just read it off here. He's a tough north-south runner between the tackles, doesn't cower out of bounds. He initiates contact, has a lateral agility, and the patience to let holes in plays develop. So what you're seeing is a patient running back, something that Frank Gore told me that's what you look for in a young running back. That's what he tried to teach Carlos Hyde. And when I had a one-on-one discussion with Frank Gore, we discussed about that, and he said he just hits the hole way too fast. He doesn't have the patient's eyes. He doesn't have the vision to see the lane. And with Najee Harris, totally opposite. Again, when you translate what the greats and some of the greats that I spoken with, this case Frank Gore, and then you take into account what Najee Harris is doing, now I can formulate a full hypothesis, not based just on my own analysis, but confirming what some of the greats. I mean, Frank Gore is a Hall of Fame running back. He's going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. No question. And when you take information and just absorb what he says and then look and apply what you learned from Frank Gore and what he has taught you or what he has told you into the blueprint for what to look for in running backs in the future, now you have something to work with. And Najee Harris has that. Najee Harris has that, right? So aside from what Frank Gore says about, being a patient runner, seeing the hole, hitting the hole, he also does a lot of things. Here are my Twitter receipts. Let me just fast forward. He always falls forward, makes the first tackler miss, always keeps feet churning. These are all fundamentals, guys. And he's been doing this since high school. Red zone touchdown machine, not scheme dependent. That's most importantly. He's not scheme dependent, meaning he can run in the ZBS zone blocking scheme, but not necessarily has to be in a power run blocking scheme. And I think that's very important because if you're a GM, your tenure there is not very long. Hopefully it's long, but more times than not, it's like 5 years at best, right? And then the turnover happens, if you're lucky to get to 5 years. But with that being said, you can see all these different coaching staffs that come into play. Well, if you just have a specific guy who's tailored to run a power run scheme instead of a zone blocking scheme, and you bring in a guy like Chip Kelly, and you want zone blocking scheme, but yet you're running a power scheme or vice versa, it really doesn't work that way because now you're stuck with a high round pick who basically doesn't fit the personnel. Then what? So Najee Harris checks the box in terms of being scheme versatile, or what I like to call not being scheme dependent. And when he's scheme universal, you can do a bunch of different things no matter who the coach is in charge. All right? So that's the most important for me. Again, my last year's draft crush was wide receiver Justin Jefferson. This year, it's none other than Najee Harris. I had the same gut feeling that I had with Justin Jefferson last year that I do with Najee Harris this year, and that's why he's ranked so high on my list. And for those who follow me on Twitter since last year, or even before that, you guys know I've been pounding on the table for Justin Jefferson to go to the 49ers, and what happened? Everyone, oh no, you're wrong. Check my podcast. It's in my podcast. I'll even link it here in the description below. But again, This is why you follow me. This is the reason why you follow me, is because I'm not afraid to put stuff out there, not just for clickbait, because I firmly believe it. And it becomes true more times than not. So Najee Harris comes in at number 4. The force is strong with this one. I'm telling you, Najee Harris is the real deal. Now watch me be wrong. Like, oh, you said Najee Harris is going to be a start and he's a bust. I'm just kidding. I don't think it's going to be a bust. But you never know. I mean, I have to get one wrong at some point, right? Just saying. Moving on to number 5. This is where it gets even more interesting because it's another Alabama guy. So I have 3 Alabama players in my top 5 big board. And you're probably saying to yourself, oh man, this is such a biased take. Such the Sakamoto thing to do. Such the BEASTwriter thing to do. 3 Alabama. Okay, cool story, bro. But then again, my receipts don't lie. So I'm going to go bold and put out another name out there, which I put in an earlier podcast early on, and that's cornerback Patrick Surtain Jr. Now, he comes in on Mel Kiper's list as the number 15th ranked player on his big board, but furthermore, he doesn't even have him ranked as his top corner. That goes to Caleb Farley out of Virginia Tech, who I believe is going to be a bust. I think Caleb Farley is going to be a bust. I even have J.C. Horn out of South Carolina ranked higher than Caleb Farley because I like his intangibles and I like his critical factors. And I'll talk about critical factors more in detail in a later podcast, but that's why you grade critical factors rather than the play itself, because you don't know what these coaches are teaching their kids as far as technique. All right, so getting back to Patrick Surtain in this podcast, he comes in at number 5, and here's the reason why, right? If you check my Twitter receipts, if you follow me on Twitter, you know I said that he's the most fundamentally sound cornerback coming out of the draft since Ahmed Plummer did it back in 2000 when he was drafted by the San Francisco 49ers, number 24 overall, out of the Ohio State University. Now, what do I like about Patrick Surtain? Well, let me just break it down for you, okay? He stays square at the line of scrimmage. He displays patient feet, doesn't open hips too early, stays stride for stride, trailing on the hip, right, in a trail position, which is very important because when you're playing press man coverage or even off man coverage and you're giving up inside or outside leverage, no matter what the leverage or what's the technique that you're being coached up to do, and then obviously using proper hand placement and using the sideline as an extra defender. But if, let's say, you're giving a release, whether it's a free release or not, and let's say it's 3rd and 5, right? Let's say it's 3rd and 5, and the wide receiver is coming straight at you, trying to go half man, right? And then all of a sudden takes that step, breaks on the ball inside, right, for a good quick slant. Your job is to break on the ball, but not to be overly aggressive, because if you do, he can then shift out that way and then there's no help, right? The safety is already playing the deep half, so he can't cover that rest of the ground. So what Patrick Surtain does, because he's smart enough to do this, is he will trail on the hip of the receiver, giving up that inside, but knowing that he has enough talent and enough closing speed to break on the ball once the ball arrives. See, if you play the other way around and over aggressive, and if you're playing over the top on that defense, and then you're trying to be all about it, well, then that receiver can hit you with a double move, or what's called a cookie route or a choice route, where he comes in and breaks out. See, these are things that cornerbacks usually have to learn at the NFL level, but Patrick Surtain, being a legacy because his dad played at the highest level with the Miami Dolphins next to Sam Madison over the course of the years and was a Pro Bowl player himself, he taught Patrick Surtain at an early age, hey, Junior, you want to play football? I'm going to teach you fundamentals first. And fundamentals, especially at the cornerback position, and I spoke about this highly when Coach Jeff Hafley was a defensive back coach with the San Francisco 49ers under Chip Kelly's staff. And, you know, Jeff Hafley, for those who don't know, went on to Ohio State, and then he now is coaching Boston College. But getting back to Coach Haf, you know, me and Coach Haf talked all the time, you know, when he had Rashad Robinson, right, from LSU, you know, very lanky guy, kind of reminded me of Samari Rolle in a way. And I would talk to him about fundamentals. I'd be like, hey man, you're coaching some fundamentals, you know, using proper hand placement, you know, using the sideline as an extra defender, and then displaying patient feet, staying square at the line of scrimmage. He's like, yeah, man, like I really teach this because at the end of the day, especially when you're stuck on an island or no matter what zone you're in, you have to be able to play with proper fundamentals. And I took that with me just like I took Frank Gore's lesson with me and then applied it as I look forward into the future when it comes to scouting and evaluating college prospects. And that's what I see in Patrick Surtain's game today. It doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what kind of zone you're in. You still have to play with proper fundamentals. And I think that goes without saying on any position, right? If you're playing the 3 technique defensive tackle position, but you're playing with a high pad level, well, the lower guy always wins. The lower guy always wins. So you got to get your pad level lower than the other guy, the guy in front of you. Otherwise, you'll lose more times than not. Now, you can take it even a step further, right? The one thing that I will say about Patrick Surtain's game, we talked about the positives, let's talk about the negatives, is he does peek into the backfield, especially down inside the red zone off play action pass, so he can get beat that way. Also, I noticed down inside the red zone, he doesn't really use proper hand placement or a jam at all at the line of scrimmage. He would rather just play off in zone coverage, trying to protect the deep ball. But at the end of the day, these things can be coached up. And again, you look for critical factors rather than the play itself because, again, you don't know what was being coached up on any particular play. So, with that being said, especially since the teams like the 49ers and the Seahawks run a cover 3 scheme anyways, it really doesn't matter unless you're playing down in distance and you're short of the sticks and so forth. All right. So, with that being said, Patrick Surtain, man, the real deal. And if you're asking me, since he comes at number 5, who his comp would be, I would say he has Nnamdi Asamoah traits to be a shutdown corner with Ahmed Plummer fundamentals. So it's a cross between 2 players. You get the fundamentals with Ahmed Plummer coming out of the draft, but then you also get a ceiling of a guy of Nnamdi Asamoah in the sense that he can be a shutdown corner week in and week out. Well, that'll be it for today. I hope you liked what I had to say. If you did, please hit the subscribe button in the lower right-hand corner of your screen as I stay up to date on all things Beast. Also, please do me a solid as I'll be continuing my mock draft tomorrow, I guess, right? Or no, later on today. I'll do it later on today. And I'll break down picks 6 through 10. Not picks through 6 through 10. What am I talking about? Picks through, I'm thinking of mock draft, guys. That's where my mind's at. I'll be breaking down my big board 6 through 10, and we will go ahead and discuss that. All right, so that'll be it for today. Thank you for tuning in. I'll be back later on tonight. Have a good night. BEASTwriter out.